All right, guys, I might be starting just a couple minutes early, and it is probably not a common uh, decision to do a live stream the night before Thanksgiving. So we'll see exactly what kind of, how many people want to watch this now. But for those of you who are watching this not live, but after the fact, I'm actually doing this on Thanksgiving evening or the night before Thanksgiving. So probably many people that might otherwise want to tune in and do this are going to probably be out rushing to catch those last groceries that you're picking up for tomorrow's event with your family, or you're on the road stuck in traffic, which I expect to be here shortly myself, hopefully trying to get home for your family events tomorrow for Thanksgiving. But in fact, I know I'm planning to stop by the grocery store with my honey-do list in hand on my way home as well. But it is, I haven't done a live stream now for a couple weeks, or at least since I wasn't able to do one last week. I was at the Washington State Farm Bureau meeting, state meeting in Pasco, and just wasn't able to do it then. Couldn't get it done before I left and couldn't do it while I was there. So figured I would get one in this week, even though it is Thanksgiving week, and at least have one in the can, and hopefully there's so many things that are worth talking about. So again, this is an Ask Me Anything event, so feel free, a live stream, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask them, put them in the chat, probably next to your screen or below, depending on how you're looking at this video right now. And if you can, just remember to use the @ button, so @WeTheGovern, just so it's easier for me to see them on the screen as I see your questions kind of pop up here. Just a real quick just update on a couple of things. If you are looking at the channel right now, the We the Govern YouTube channel, you'll notice that there are 2 videos pending. I've recorded a couple of them, and one of the videos that I put up on Saturday is going to be discussing the initiative project. I launched a video this morning that kind of more of a documentary sort of style, just a little short one, but just showing what it was like to be at the signature turn-in event yesterday at the Tumwater Secretary of State office with the Let's Go Washington first submission of the initiatives. And that was on I-2117, which is the repeal the carbon tax scheme, the kind of secret stealth tax scheme that Inslee has loved so much. And that was, they turned in 418,399 signatures, and they needed to turn in 325,000. So they approximately had about 85,000 more than they needed. I'm kind of expecting that. And there were protesters there, of course. In fact, they actually did. I'll talk about this a little bit, just for those of you who weren't there. And I know there were a number of people that came down. There was actually 2 different events that Let's Go Washington had organized around the signature submission process. And it's kind of worth just discussing that a little bit, because it was kind of neat. There's not a lot of these things that have been done since Tim Eyman's last initiative a number of years ago on the repeal of the car tabs initiative, right before Bob Ferguson really took him to the cleaners and to destroy his life. And what I believe is very much a political prosecution beyond any others that we've seen in this state. But that was really kind of the last initiative that anybody on the conservative kind of freedom-oriented side had actually seen. There was a referendum, I-90, during the COVID kind of lockdown era that went on the ballot, that they did collect plenty of more than they needed on signatures on that. But that was referendums, I think, are always confusing. Initiatives are usually a little bit more straightforward in the sense of the language that actually ends up on the ballot. So the Secretary of State's office had recently, just in the last year or so, changed its address location, and they no longer collect the initiatives at the 520 Union Street location, which is where they've been doing it for decades. And instead, they moved it over to Israel Road, which is in Tumwater, probably in part due to the fact that the city of Olympia has so much crime and homeless problems, and their cars are getting broken into, and it was probably not a safe location anymore in Olympia, and so they wanted to move it to Tumwater, which is much nicer. So this is the first time that they'd ever collected signatures at that location, so some of this was a new experience for us there. However, the Let's Go Washington folk had organized earlier in the day press event up in Kent, at the Shell station that was actually on Central there that had been used for a they'd done an event earlier in the summer, which I believe that I wrote about earlier or did a video about anyway, where they were basically selling gas. I did a video about this, that's right, a few months ago, and it was where they were selling gas the same price that the gas would be sold in a state that didn't have the carbon tax increases. And so that same Shell station is where they had, and that had highlighted, of course, the significance of some of these initiatives, that being one of them, the repealing the carbon tax, gas tax increase. And they did an event there earlier for most of the media. And I know the Seattle Times was there, I believe Cairo News, there were a number of other kind of media outlets that were there, and there were a number of volunteers that were there as well. I'll probably do an article about this and post up some actual photos from both of those locations because it's kind of worth just seeing what it looks like and kind of what happened. And then later in the day, around 1 o'clock down in Tumwater is where they made actually submitted the initiative, the signature sheets to the Secretary of State's office. And I remember this isn't the end of the story because essentially what happens, and my video on Saturday that I'm launching just goes into this a little more detail, but even though they've submitted way more than they need for this initiative to get on the ballot, they'll probably be collecting more signatures over the span of the next month. And so they'll add those signatures to that amount that they've already turned in. I mean, that serves as just a deeper buffer. There's no such thing as turning in too many signatures. But if you look at the Let's Go Washington website right now, you'll see that they are tracking the overall number of signatures that they need to get, and which is, I think, close to 2.4 million or 2.5 million signatures. And they're at about 2.3, I remember, 2.2, 2.3. They're in somewhere in that ballpark. The numbers keep changing, keeps going up. So that really indicates that they're likely to be turning in several more initiatives over the span of the next couple weeks, and you'll probably see some similar events. So if you weren't able to make it to this first event before Thanksgiving, I believe you'll be able to go to some of these other events. And there's plenty of good initiatives there, repealing the capital gains tax, no income tax, letting parents have more transparency of what's going on in schools and the medical system, with their kids. God help us if we let parents know actually what's happening. That's what the left thinks. Another one was restoring police pursuit, common sense police pursuit, and another one is repealing just the terrible long-term care scam tax that is also not been popular if anybody pays any attention to it. And so all these things are out there, and they're still collecting signatures all the way through the end of December. But on the ones I think that they have a lot more, they're starting to turn them in one by one. And again, they'll add to them as the rest of the year goes by. But if you're a volunteer out there and you got some signature sheets, get them filled out and get them turned into the Let's Go Washington so they get counted and they don't get ignored. And that way you get to go along with you can be part of this project. It's a big deal. There literally has never been a signature drive this large in Washington State's history ever. So this is significant. And for them to be, based on their goals, to be so close to their goals and already starting to turn in some of these signature sheets sets right now is very exciting. So I think that'll be kind of neat to just see what that looks like. Now, there were a couple other things I wanted to just immediately address to give an update for regular viewers so they kind of know what's going on. Sometimes I get people asking some of these questions. As you know, I have filed a lot of complaints with the Public Disclosure Commission on just a lot of different groups that have committed campaign finance violations in the state. Let me just give you a quick update on a few of them that have been processed by the Public Disclosure Commission in the last couple days, maybe last week or so. There's more than this, of course, but I try to keep it as updated on the We the Govern website as I can, but honestly, I'm getting so many of these come in right now. It actually takes a bit of time just to keep it updated. But if you want to see the source documents and see what's going on, you can either look at the PDC enforcement page at pdc.wa.gov, or you can go look at We the Governed and just look at About Glen, and you'll see, or even just go from the front page, really, where I detail the total number of complaints and how many people have been sued and how many fines they've had and all that good stuff. In the last couple days, they've had official warning letters and sanctions from the PDC on these three committees that have to do with school bond levies. The Meade Citizens Advisory Committee PAC, that's out in Spokane. the Citizens Committee for Education in Puyallup PAC, and the Lake Washington Schools Levy Committee PAC, which is up in King County. In addition to those, on the political side, the Snohomish County Democrats also received official sanctions. Pierce County Democrats, Green Party of Washington, the Washington Progressive Party, and the King County Young Democrats. And keep in mind, there's a lot more than what I'm telling you about that are currently being investigated for more significant violations. But these are ones that they were caught breaking the law. It's unambiguous. If they were Republican groups, they'd probably get fined. But since they're Democrat groups, at least at this level of category, they're getting warning letters. Actually, the Pierce County Democrats is particularly notable because they've had multiple warning letters in a row now that I've got them in trouble. I think it's like 4. Some number like that. That's just getting ridiculous that the PDC isn't actually enforcing the campaign finance laws in that group. But I'll keep filing the complaints as they keep breaking the law. In addition to those, the Jackson Legacy PAC, which is kind of one of the largest not the largest, but one of the larger left-leaning groups, PACs in the state. They were also sanctioned for a variety of violations that I remember I caught them for. And then the Campaign for Tribal Self-Reliance, sponsored by the Washington Indian Gaming Association PAC, that one as well. They probably should have been fined on that one, judging from all the problems that I'd uncovered there, but it is what it is. A number of candidates there as well: Ed Potthurst, Kathleen Martin, former Seattle City Council candidates, Ted Cummings, who's a perennial candidate out in the 4th Legislative District, kind of outside of Spokane, more in the Spokane Valley area. He was in trouble. Also, Pro-Choice PAC, that was one more. There's others, but that was just a quick rundown of just the last couple days. I'm catching a lot more, and it looked to me like about 100, well, no, about 50 or so. We're moving into this more deeper level of investigation, as well as of several more that are still in the process of trying to be resolved. I've got about another 200 complaints, I think, that I've kind of lined up. I've actually been slacking a little bit lately and not getting them filed with the PDC, which I need to try to catch up on. So if I have some time this weekend, I'll start to try to catch up. Maybe I can get 30 or 40 of them filed this weekend. But there's a lot more coming. And I just wanted to give you an update because I sometimes do videos or talk about the complaints I filed or some of the violations that I catch. And it's helpful to have kind of a follow-up to that so you know which ones actually were sanctioned or fined. I know that the Whatcom County Democrats had to forfeit, I don't know, like $600-700 just a couple days ago, as well as the Clark County Democrats. They had to forfeit a couple $100s as well for illegal. In one case, it was illegal anonymous contributions. In another case, it was for illegal candidate contributions to them, which is more of an esoteric element to Washington State's campaign finance laws. So anyway, that's just a quick update on that stuff. The video that launches tomorrow on Thanksgiving, and yes, I am launching one Thanksgiving morning. You can share it with your friends and family if they want to know exactly what the heck We the Government's about. But it's a video kind of on a theme that I've thought about for a number of years now, really, and it was just talking about who watches The Watchmen. So not the comic book series, but actually the original concept that came out of the Roman poet and Juvenal from the 1st, 2nd century, so a couple thousand years ago. And basically questioning who's watching those who are in charge, and how the checks and balances, I think, of the Founding Fathers have frayed or fallen apart, or not really, they're not being used in a way to actually hold government accountable, and what we can do about it. So anyway, I hope you enjoy that video. It'll launch tomorrow, and so I'm trying to get back on a regular video schedule. And if you haven't seen the video that I launched this morning about the initiative, the signature turn-in process, please do. It's a lot of B-roll footage from the actual event itself, and I was able to interview Brian Haywood, who's the primary funding sponsor to the PAC. I was also able to interview Jim Walsh, who's the person who actually sponsored the video, or the initiatives, or that initiative anyway. He wrote that initiative originally and submitted to the Secretary of State's office. So it's very exciting. There are a lot of good activists, a lot of good volunteers that were there. It was fun to see everybody there. And so that's it, just starting out with this Thanksgiving week. I think there's a lot to be thankful for, and a lot's going on. So anyway, with that, I'm going to try to get to some of the questions that people have. and hopefully this will I can answer some of them. So let's see what you'll have. And I think, well, we don't have as many people on as we usually do, but I'm not surprised. It is the day before Thanksgiving. So elegant brutality. You had a question here about Spokane completely flipping to all Democrat, which is like, wow, really? Well, that's unfortunate. Yeah, the elections in Spokane, there were actually a lot of good elections around the state. Pasco, Kennewick. Paulsville elected a terrible person, but some of the other elections out there went well. I'm aware of about 20, say, school board districts where the elections generally went pretty well. But yes, Spokane did very poorly. I'm sorry, because Spokane's basically got a really hardcore grifting operation now going on with the Democrats that you did elect or reelected in that city. They'll be stealing from that city or grifting to their friends as much as they can, and it's going to be it won't be fun to watch them waste basically the resources that they have. With that particular crew coming in there, crime will certainly go up. I'm sure they'll find some way to make it a lot more miserable to live in Spokane. But I also don't see their time in office as being perpetual and forever, because all you have to do is get in there and start paying attention to what they're doing, because I think a lot of people just didn't know. The Ryan Berg, so before I get to that, Alex Brown, you have a question with ballot measures 1114 getting struck down in Oregon. How likely do you think we'll see change on the 2A front here in Washington? Yeah, good point. That for those of you who haven't been paying attention, and it's hard because on the 2A front, there's a number of different legal battles that are going on, including some in Washington, but this is one out of Oregon. And that one was shot down by the federal judge there pretty decisively, actually. So I don't know how much that specific decision is going to affect the cases in Washington, but probably there's some similarities there. There's also some differences, so it's hard to know how much that helps. But obviously, we want to keep winning these court cases. I don't like putting our freedom and liberty in the hands of some judges. They can be corrupted too, so it's kind of an issue. But that was still good news, and you take your wins when you find them. Ryan, you got a Berg. Great work on I-2117 ballot submission. Could we utilize the initiative process to force a return to in-person one-day elections? You could. I am not certain, though, based on all surveys that I've seen, both of Republicans and Democrats, so it's not just one party, that it would be a popular choice that the voters would actually decide, especially mail-in voters deciding that they want to go in person again. People like the convenience of it. Most people aren't aware of all the problems. Less people are like it today than they did just 5 years ago. But again, it's trending in the way that a lot of people don't like it. But still, it's the overwhelming majority of people in Washington State generally do like the ease and convenience. And so overcoming that is not a simple process. But yes, it could be done by initiative process. The one thing I will point out, though, on that is if you're going to try to change that via the initiative process, you really have to also be completely aware of federal law, especially the 1993 motor voter law, essentially, and some of the updates to that federal law, because you're going to still have to conform to what those requirements are. And you can still do that with in-person voting, of course, but you just need to be aware of that if that's one of the ideas you have. Cristiano, you got a question here. Who is the supreme ruler mentioned in our state constitution? Supreme ruler. Okay. Can we impeach it, him, her, theirs, yours? I'm assuming that you meant yours there, use. Yeah, and actually, here's a bigger question there. On the supreme ruler, does that conform now to the modern wokester ideology that they have to determine what their pronouns are? And I'd be fascinated to see how the left would prioritize that. Jason Fisher had a question here. Happy Thanksgiving, Glenn. You doing anything special with your family? And we always do something special with the family, I think, on Thanksgiving. I mean, a lot of this is, I think we celebrate Thanksgiving the way that I think hopefully most people do, in that you spend that time getting together with other people. It's not about always the food that you're eating. It's, of course, about seeing family members that you haven't seen in a while, and it's always fun for me to do that. I actually grew up when I was with a big family, big extended family, lots of aunts and uncles, lots of cousins, and particularly on my dad's side, but also on my mom's side as well. And so I have a lot of memories growing up where we'd get together and we'd have large family gatherings at my grandparents, who have all since passed away now. But at my grandparents' family homes, the old farm that they had on one side of the family in particular, and those are very positive memories that I have, and I'm hoping that we're creating positive memories for our kids and the next generation as well. So I have a couple different. We have two family gatherings that we're going to on Thanksgiving. So I'm sure that we'll have lots of calories that we have to burn off over the weekend. But anyway, that's how I'm spending my Thanksgiving. I hope that you're doing the same thing. Thanksgiving is definitely a time to appreciate what we have and not get mired down so much, I think, in the negativity that is, it's easy to get distracted by negative directions. I mean, listen, we're in tough times in our country, I believe, politically a challenging environment as well, and lots of drama and chaos out there in the world. Anybody that's been paying attention to the news today, few hours ago, we were hearing about a potential terrorist attack, a car bomb on the Canadian border, and now it sounds like that's not what happened, and that it might have been just a reckless, crazy driver who caused a terrible accident. I don't know. I mean, the news is still caught up in the fog of whatever's going on out there, but it is worth just noting that Thanksgiving's a good time to reflect on where you're at and what we have to be thankful for, and to kind of reconnect with family and friends that you may not have seen in a while. And I encourage everybody to do that, not just go out and take advantage of Black Friday and spending a bunch of money. So back to the next question. Let's see. There's a question here about from Pamela Hansen. Everyone that reads Jolt Online News, which stands for Just Olympia Lacey Tumwater, which is a kind of a local news site in Thurston County here, that eventually pays off to show up. They mentioned my name in the regarding the Tumwater property tax limit lift. Please show up. Jolt Online News shows up. Okay, great. I like local news, and always get out there and read it, share it, and see what's going on. Cat's eye, fluoride in Spokane water. Yeah, I like that. I don't think that's why they voted poorly, but if you have a lot of money, gosh, especially as Lisa Brown, what a corrupt individual. So you got some bad people in Spokane. I'm sorry. You'll try to compete with Seattle, I suppose, and you should actually start thinking about who you put in office out there if you get a chance. This is funny. Cristiano got a question. Any chances for AI to replace all judges? Well, that's a great question. That's actually kind of funny because judges, in theory, right, if you present the information and AI has the ability to distinguish it, they could probably give you an answer on the likely ruling that would come down. But I don't see that judges are going to be replaced by AI anytime soon. Even though AI would have the potential to be certainly more honest than the judges that we have, more consistent anyway. But of course, you could also fool AI and get the results that you want that way as well. I don't see it happening, especially since they'd have to pass a wide range of exceptional laws to get to that point, and I don't see that happening anytime soon. Carrie Rock, you got a question about how can we find good people to run for office in the position of judge and become reasonable in our courts again? Well, I'll tell you what, that's actually a great question, and one that I'd like to talk about. At times, I've talked about this in the past, about the difficulty of running good people for judicial office. We have a lot of really bad judges in Washington State. We have more bad judges every time Inslee appoints a new one. Rarely does he appoint people who are honest and not corrupted and not politically weaponizing their position in government, unfortunately. Now, listen, that doesn't make much difference to you if you are appealing a traffic ticket or you're going to court on some relatively minor issue, which is the interaction that most people end up having in the court setting. When you're talking about Superior Court cases, though, that are much more serious, either addressing conflicts that you may have with your individual freedom and rights and the continuous and almost endless abuse of big government in one capacity or another, you're not going to get good rulings from judges because they're compromised and they don't even pay attention to the language of the law or the Constitution frequently when they're doing their writings, or when they're doing their rulings. So we really do need good people in there that will read that'll be aware of what our state constitution is. They'll have read it, they understand it, and they'll know how to make rulings that are consistent with the intention of the law in the way that it's written, and not in how they wish it was under their progressive agenda. And that's a big deal. It's a huge thing for me. The judiciary is a very difficult place to recruit people to run for office, particularly when the sitting judges and their associations threaten attorneys that are qualified to run for that position. They threaten them with career destruction. They threaten their law firms. They threaten, there's just lots of bizarre threats. It's really a mob sort of operation around the judiciary in our state, and it's very unhealthy, and it's exceptionally dishonest, and it's actually far worse than I'm representing here. So we really have a lot of challenges in the judiciary, but we've also lacked a consistent approach to documenting some of these problems. I think one of the things we have to do is do a much better job paying attention to how the judges rule and starting to document the crazier of the judges. It's disappointing that in the course of doing that, of course, they're going to be destroying people's lives, but they're doing that already anyway. And justice is rarely being served in the court systems. So anywhere in the state, it doesn't matter if you think you're in a red area or not. It's not that every judge is completely bad. You're going to have some that are fairly honest, but they're not going that way, and you see this heavy push from the left to not only always be very deferential to the state in any kind of decision or conflict between the state and the people, but in addition to that, they're willing to weaponize it periodically, the law, so that it always favors special interests that fit the current political regime that the Democrats want you to have in it. And then worse than that too, on top of that, this tendency to say that no matter how violent, nasty, and terrible a criminal is, no matter how many times they victimize people, they just want to keep putting them back out on the street. The judges aren't the only part of that equation, but they're a big part of it, and it's an ugly part. And we need to just do a lot more work to start validating or documenting the judges that are bad, and then starting to early recruit people who are willing to run for office. They can't come out of a big law firm, because the big law firms are almost all compromised. And if you run for office as an attorney at that law firm, the law firm usually fires you or lays you off or won't let you practice there for a while. So you're going to have people that do have a law degree, which is one of the requirements, but probably isn't actively practicing, or you have to be a sole practitioner on your own and be willing to do it that way. We need to find those candidates, and then we need to run real campaigns for them, real campaigns, not last minute filing week and just hope that somehow magical thinking will get them across the finish line. They may have to run real campaigns. It's not as easy as I think sometimes people think. Let's see. Also, let's see. I'm sorry. Here we go. Here's a question by Cristiano again. Do you think we have sleeper cells? I'm assuming is what you meant, not sleeping cells. Terrorists in Seattle. Well, that's a great question. I would say that it's probably a fair assessment, considering everything else, the number of people that would love to commit terrorism of some kind. And I'll define terrorism in the traditional sense that you actually would want to blow things up or destroy things that would cause great harm in our community. And so Antifa would be, there's probably some people come out of that group. You would have others that have other reasons for getting together. There's a lot of reasons to hate America, I think, that these guys have. And a lot of reasons they don't like us. And it's reasonable to think in a big enough metropolitan area that you're going to have some percentage of the population who may want to do something like that. Plus the indoctrination that the left wing seems to be pushing in Seattle and just everywhere in our country also creates fertile ground for recruits to join crazy causes and to do terrible things and justify it. So we've had this happen in America before. This isn't actually as unique as people think. I would recommend you go back and look at the anarchist movement around the turn of the 19th century, when or late 1800s, early 1900s. See how many people how many politicians were assassinated, how many bombs were set off by that movement in America at the time, and it was pretty substantial and significant. And so we've been there before. we don't need to go there again, but our education system has certainly created an environment where I think we're going to have more of that in the future. Obviously, I don't know any specific sleeper cells, but I would guess that we probably do have some. Jim Downey, Oregon 114, was shot down by a state judge. Yes, in Harney County. We already talked about this question, so it's not really a question. Have you followed the Sunoco sheriff election? A more left-leaning sheriff was elected despite overwhelming support for Fortney, and there was a $30,000 super PAC donation last minute from D.C. Yeah, that's unfortunate. Snohomish County definitely went backwards in who the sheriff is. The only thing I've really been involved in directly up there was I did file a couple complaints, and in fact she was found, got in trouble with the Public Disclosure Commission for violations of campaign finance laws. The $30,000 last-minute super PAC donation I'm not as familiar with. That's not necessarily illegal just because it happened, but there were a lot of people that wanted a sheriff that would not, that was more compliant with big government agendas and more friendly to criminals, and that's what they elected apparently. So that's not a good thing. So let's see, Jason, you're asking a question about what are your thoughts on Washington Judge Stain magazine ban case pending Ninth Circuit California case. For the Illinois gun challenge, have better luck if success. Well, I mean, here's the thing. I think that the Oregon decision has kind of a more local impact in our area. Obviously, we've got this Ninth Circuit Court case. The Supreme Court's apparently going to be looking at, the federal Supreme Court's going to be looking at another 2A challenge. So there's just a lot of stuff that happening out there on the 2A front. I kind of feel like I should probably just do a whole video only on the Second Amendment issues in our state. Maybe that would be, I can kind of get a little bit more organized than just dealing with it in a Ask Me Anything campaign. But some of these legal cases are probably going to lead to some success. Again, I don't like the idea of relying on judges to be honest, and so many of them are not. But right now, that seems to be an area that we're winning in, and so it's worth continuing to go down that road. I would definitely work on replacing the politicians who think that you don't deserve to have firearms to defend yourself. What's interesting is that recent study that came out, there's far more people who have firearms to defend themselves in America today than there have ever been that they've ever recorded in the past. It's actually, firearm ownership is increasing across the country as a percentage of the population, at least since they've been tracking it, I believe, since the late 60s. There's more people now that are owning firearms to defend themselves than there were in the past. And so I think that generally trends more positively in the Second Amendment direction. Let's see. John, you had a question here. Hi, Glenn. I sent Kathy McMorris Rogers and Maria Cantwell an email to stop funding Ukraine and help out Maui. Any good? Well, I'm assuming your question is that going to do you any good? And I think it always adds up over time, but we'll see where it goes. Barry Wood, you have a question. Now what? Doesn't mean anything to me because I don't know the context you're bringing that question to me at. So modify it so I know what you're talking about. Jason, you're asking me what's your thoughts on the Democrat Washington governor primary. Well, that's a good question. Obviously, we're still a year away from the governor's race next year in 2024. More significantly, probably in determining who's going to be on that final ballot, it's going to be the August primary. And even related to that is going to be filing week of next May, which we're getting closer on, a little over 6 months away. So filing week, and then actually even before then, is the April Republican convention where they're going to be officially endorsing which Republican candidate that the Washington State Party gets behind. And this is the first time Washington's done this since the top two primary system was put in place, which essentially kind of devalued or had a pretty significant impact on parties' ability to influence who their candidates were going to be in any given election cycle. So they were weakened a lot by the top two primary system. It was a political insider's push to get that in, and they've succeeded. And so now we're in a situation where the Republicans, the Democrats have done this before too, but the Republicans have done a lot more of it, which is where they flooded the zone with a bunch of candidates, watered down their own voter base, and then the top two primary people to get through were 2 Democrats. Now that's happened the other way around. We actually got a state treasurer as a result of this in 2016, I believe, when 2 Democrats basically canceled each other out. And 3 Democrats canceled each other out, and 2 Republicans got on the final general ballot. And so you had to choose between one of the Republicans. That's more likely, though, what's happened in the Secretary of State race. It's happened in the 10th legislative district race, lieutenant governor race, a number of other races lately where the Republicans have flooded the zone with a bunch of people who each take a little piece of the pie. And in a top 2 primary system, if there's 2 strong enough Democrats, they knock them out. Same thing happened in the 47th Leg District in Kent, just this last cycle. So when you look at those types of decisions or results, the logical conclusion that the Republican Party's been going down, and the Democrats already do this, but they do it a little bit. They're much more in decision-making processes behind closed doors, and so the Democrats already do this. The Republicans are going to be more open about it and officially letting all of the Republican PCOs get together in a convention right before filing week next year in April, and those Republican PCOs have the ability to vote on which of the candidates for major office. So it looks to me like it's going to be statewide office holders and congressional candidates at this point in time. And so when there's more than one, the Republican PCOs there are going to vote to decide who they endorse. So if you are running, and right now there's really just 2 Republican campaigns for governor that are moving ahead. So you have Semi Bird and you have Dave Reichert. So the 2 of those campaigns should probably be spending some time reaching out to Republican PCO groups around the state, trying to get their guy to get the vote. Now, I'm not endorsing this race. I'm actually a moderator for the only known gubernatorial Republican debate between the candidates that I believe is coming up in Pierce County in February, and I'm the moderator, and I feel honored to be in that position. Both campaigns have apparently accepted me since I'm not endorsing anybody. They've accepted me as a moderator in that case, and I hope to do a good job, and I hope to highlight both candidates' positions and giving them an opportunity to present themselves to the public. The bigger issue in the governor's race, and so that's how the Republicans are going to go, and I think that's their main focus, is to probably get that party endorsement, which benefits the person who gets it because the party will promote that person through all their correspondence and throughout the state. It doesn't prevent the other one from running, whoever doesn't get it, or maybe there's more than one at that time. But it is a worthwhile exercise for them to go through to try to get that endorsement. On the Democrat side, it's a little more interesting in the sense that Hillary Franz has dropped out of that race now, and she's decided, I think, to run for the 6th congressional district. I mean, who knows? She changes her mind on what office she's going to run for all the time, and so her dropping out really gives Bob Ferguson a clear first position spot for the Democrat Party. Now, you still have the 5th legislative district Senator Mark Mullet, who's actually on the ballot as well. Now, Mark is running as a Democrat. But he's in a big fight with Inslee because Inslee tried to sabotage him and take him out 4 years ago and failed to do so. However, the Democrat Party, even though he is a Democrat, the only reason he got elected in the 5th legislative district, which includes Issaquah and those other areas, is because the Republicans got behind him as the better choice because he was running against a crazy person that Inslee had endorsed. So Mark Mullet's in there, and he's been one of the last Democrats. He may be one of the last couple Democrats in the entire elected body in Olympia who actually believes that math is real. He disagrees with Republicans on social issues mainly, but fiscally he's relatively conservative, and so he's drawn a lot of attention from lobbyists and lobby world where they're giving him money, and that's kind of supporting his campaign. However, it's tough with him and Dave Reichert to some extent. They are pulling from some of the same donor world, and so there's a little bit of kind of a self. They're basically taking from each other more than anything else. So I don't know how that's going to play out yet. we are still fairly early in the governor's race. There's always a potential for somebody else to jump in. A number of big names that people would normally put on this list have definitely said they're not going to run for office. So what we're really looking at for this audience purposes, I think, is just these two Republican candidates and probably going up against Ferguson, most likely. Obviously, anybody, including a meth addict off the streets of Seattle, would be better than Bob Ferguson in the governor's mansion. But that, I think, is obvious. But then where it goes from here, part of the reason you have a campaign is you have to demonstrate that you have your act together and you have some kind of an organization and you know what you're doing, and you get far enough down the road that you convince people that you're the person to be voted on. But that's where we're at right now. Let me look at, I've lost my position here. Okay. I'm going to try to, there's a lot of questions starting to come up now. Robert Barnes advocates, this is T.Z. Burton, for removing the bar requirement to practice law. Is it mandatory for lawyers to pass the bar to practice law? Can we get rid of the bar? Great questions. That's actually a really good question. There's only one state in America that doesn't require you to pass the bar in order to be a practicing attorney. And I believe I'm correct when I say this. So last I checked on this is true, but it was Arizona, and every other state requires a bar license or being from the Bar Association. Now, I wouldn't mind removing the bar. Washington State Bar has had it's been plagued with corruption. The head of the bar just a few years ago, she was arrested for fraud, if I remember right, felony fraud. The Bar Association has tended to be manipulated politically, no surprise, to usually go after more conservative lawyers, or certainly go after any lawyers that run against judges that the Bar Association might like. But at this point in time, in order to be a practicing attorney in Washington State, you have to pass the bar. So you probably have quite a few laws to change to get there. And I'm going to tell you, unless you get the legislature to do it, or a citizens initiative, I imagine, I mean, everybody in the legal process is tied into the Bar Association, so they're probably going to try to fight it. There's Matthew Menich. You have a question here. Are you familiar with the Barnham and Klausterfelt insular proclivities in regards to the tethered income remunerants of non-boundable participles? No, I'm not. I have no idea what you're talking about. So, thank you for asking a weird question. Cristiano got a question about any thoughts on the new Argentinian president. Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty funny. I like to see things in elections like this turn out differently, where you get somebody in that you're not expecting to win, and to have somebody self-define themselves as an anarcho-libertarian, self-defined, is highly unusual. To my knowledge, that's probably the first person who's ever defined themselves that way, ever elected to any major position of power in the world, especially a country as big as Argentina, and it is a large country. I've only been there once, and I enjoyed being in Argentina, and I would not want to live there over America, but it was still a beautiful country. I was in Mendoza up north when I was staying there, basically to try to in my failed attempt to climb Mount Aconcagua. But I stayed in a youth hostel there. It's been 13 years ago, I think, quite a while ago, with a good friend of mine. And I liked Argentina. Argentina is a neat country, has a lot of potential. Argentina, like many countries, has had self-immolated with just some horrible political leadership, if you could call it that, big government abuses, socialistic tendencies, destruction of the currency, massive inflation, bad crime, and everything else that goes along anytime you try any kind of socialist policies. It's a great way to destroy your future your generations, destroy your country. Socialism always fails every time. It's so awesome. So to see a country like that, having gone down that rat hole far enough, and suffered the way that they have, especially over the last 2 decades, to see them actually be willing to change and elect somebody like this, and to see that their election system isn't so corrupted that this guy was actually able to get through, that's pretty significant. Now, getting elected is just the first part. Does he have the ability to do what he says he's going to do? And the most interesting thing to me, as an outsider looking at what he's going to do, but as a wonkish kind of government guy, is actually his eliminating their central bank, downsizing, like I think 5 agencies that he would just get government agencies that he could totally get rid of, if he actually does that, that's going to be significantly beneficial, I think, for the country. I think it's chaotic for a while, but it's very significantly beneficial. And there's a big, powerful interests who are going to probably try to stop him from doing that. So I don't know how close to his promises he can get once he's in there. But if they're, and I'm not as familiar with how the Argentinian government operates and how powerful a position this really is, but if he can actually do that, that'd be a big deal. For his country, going on the dollar standard is also a fairly big deal. That changes it probably would certainly eliminate the inflationary drama that they have. Now, anybody's familiar, if you live in America, you know that we're also suffering from inflation, and our currency's been overproduced, and we benefit as being from having the world's reserve currency, so that kind of hides some of the problems that we would have otherwise with the fiat currency we have now. But for Argentina, considering the situation they're in, dollarizing is probably a good plan. I would think with the natural resources there, they could come up with something a little different, but as a temporary measure, that's probably not a bad way to stabilize their country and maybe reduce some of the gyrations they've had with extreme inflation and economic disasters. It's got to be a hard place to run a business and to try to function normally and gain wealth or future for your kids. It's got to be tough. So if he can actually do that there, that's going to be a pretty significant change. It's probably one of the most consequential worldwide elections that's happened this year, and we'll see if he's able to stick to that moving forward. It's just good to see somebody different step up and do something like that. Let's see. Alpha Charlie Tango, other than the law, why would a law degree be necessary to work as a judge? Well, okay, so here's the theory on that. And if you're a judge and you're ruling on the law, I don't know if you've ever sat through court. It's worse than going to a medical convention and listening to doctors throw acronyms at each other about stuff in a way that just simply demonstrates that they're familiar with the latest lingo and that you don't know what you're talking about. They do the same thing in education. If you've ever gone to one of those programs or anything else where they're using high volumes of acronyms or archaic language to describe stuff. Court is like that all the time. So there's legal theories and arguments that you're going to be making in court that a judge is theoretically ruling on the merits. And if you don't understand those basic issues in the first place, the argument's going to be that you're not going to be an effective judge. That I find to be a argument more effective at the higher levels of the judiciary than at the lower levels. But like in district court, I think you could get away with quite a bit more. But you just simply, I think you just need to go in and get trained up. It would be nice if there was some way of taking a test, short of the bar membership, but maybe just taking a test where you could demonstrate you understand the law. And then that would be enough for you to be able to run for judge. I would like to see that. Jason, have you heard of Robert Barnes? He's a lawyer who represented Alex Jones. He has a podcast that you would make an awesome guest on, I'm assuming you're saying. No, I think I've heard the name, but I mean, listen, I'll be a guest on any podcast if it makes sense. Let's see. T.Z. Burton, the Republicans lost even more ground in Washington State, lost Snohomish and Spokane. Yes, they did lose some of those positions there. They gained in a number of other places, if anybody's paying attention, which I don't think many are. This was the local elections in a lot of places around the state. I'm aware of probably close to about 100 school board seats that were flipped in a good direction, and at least 40 or so city council seats. There were some negative outcomes as well. There always are, but and Spokane in particular was bad. And losing the sheriff in Snohomish County was bad. But we can definitely talk more about that. I'll try to do an election special where I kind of focus on that a little bit more. TZ, again, you can interview William Kirk of Washington Gun Law. Yeah, he's great, by the way. I recommend anybody going to Washington Gun Law if you want to know more about what's going on in the 2A issues in their state. And he's probably one of the best people locally. We're very fortunate to have him here. Let's see. This is Esteban Gallo. Thanks for asking questions like that. Is the Joker really Batman's arch nemesis, or is that all media hype? Any historically carbon dating with the comic books, or are they anachronistic forgeries? That's funny. Okay. I see Nick Smith. You're a semi-bird fan. Give Olympia the bird. Let's see. TZ saying that Semi and Dave need to get together and draw straws for who will run. We can't let two Democrats get top two. Listen, that's a common concern, but I'm going to tell you right now, at this point in time, there is no top two Democrats getting through. There's going to be Bob Ferguson, and then there's going to be somebody else, and that's it. And somebody else is probably, I would find it highly unlikely that you would have, there's too many Republicans in the state that you would get another Democrat if there's only two Republicans on the ballot. The question is who gets through. And it's getting really late for somebody else to jump into that race at this point in time. And the elections, just a JAIC make a comment here, the elections for governor in 2024. Campaign's already started, but the elections for governor in 2024. Yeah, I would love this, Alex. If I think I'll try to reach out to William Kirk on with Washington Gun Law. I talked to him a while ago. We had this conversation at an event we were both at, and I love his work, and he'd be fun to have in here in an interview, actually. John, which Republican has the best chance to win the governorship? I can't tell at this point in time, realistically. So whoever runs against Ferguson and gets through has actually a pretty good chance of becoming the next governor. Ferguson has an incredibly high negative viewing. I mean, he's not a very positively viewed person, even among Democrats, which is surprising. So I think that there's some opportunities there. Cristiano, Federal Way is now contemplating rent control. Is it fair to put it for a vote to begin with? There's more renters than landlords voting. Yeah, rent control is terrible. I mean, anybody that's paid any attention to how it doesn't work, that's just, I think rent control is just, it's idiotic, but nevertheless, that's the kind of people you seem to get in office who think that's a good idea. David, you say we need some dinos, which is, I'm assuming, is Democrat in name only. And there's several of them out there, but they're a dying species, largely getting wiped out by the lefties on the Democrat side. Let's see. Jay, are you aware that Portland and Seattle are supposed to be two of the very first of the 50-minute cities? They choose 6 from what I understand, and of course, I'm sandwiched in between them. Yeah, Portland and Seattle are hardly alone in that. Listen, anybody that's been paying attention to this, okay, so anybody that's been paying attention to the central planning schemes that have been around and a big part of kind of a socialist movement in this country for a long time, and around the world for a long time. All these new names, 15-Minute City, Agenda 2030, Agenda 2020, whatever it is. I actually, years ago, stumbled on a esoteric or obscure debate anyway by the Mensheviks, if you're familiar with pre-revolution Soviet Russia, pre-Soviet Russia. The Mensheviks and the Bolsheviks were the two flavors of socialism that were floating around at that time. At least those are the two dominant flavors. And they were debating amongst themselves. And the Mensheviks really had this idealized city design concept, central planning design concept, that were very similar actually to what you see pushed by your local central plan department in whatever city you're in today. And this has been a dream scheme for socialists and control of people for a long time. And it's very different than managing growth in an environment. It's all about control, and it's all about manipulation of the plan and the control so that some people benefit and some do not. And that's always been what this has been about. And so whether it's 15-minute cities today or some other scheme tomorrow, none of those are good ideas. They all fail in the end, and it doesn't work too well. And unfortunately, a lot of people get hurt along the way, which is biggest problem with central planning, I think, that we always run into. Let's see. Is it mullet like the fish or like the haircut? Because it's a big no for it's a fish's name. It's mullet like the haircut. That's I believe how he spells it. That's what I think. But you can look it up. Mark Mullet, 5th Legislative District. Easy to find. Nick Smith, you got a question here. Democratic judge doesn't even know what a woman is. If she got the job, anybody should be able to qualify. Yeah, okay, so here's the problem that ends up happening, and this is not unusual. from a conservative, liberty, freedom-oriented standpoint, we tend to think we got clowns and morons in office, and therefore I'm certainly more qualified than they are, so why can't I run against them? Because obviously I'm not a clown or a moron. That's the theory. That's kind of how people tend to look at these things. And unfortunately, yes, we do oftentimes have clowns and morons elected to office or appointed to office, and as the case may be, the judge issue that you're talking about. However, there's a lot more to running for office than being a better qualified or more capable or more intelligent person than the one who's in there right now. And I think that's the part that people forget when they're deciding to run for office. It is a lot more about the campaign and, frankly, a lot less at the end of the day about the candidates, in particular on the Democrat side. They can push through people. Heck, they just had a Skamania race for school board where somebody who died right after they filed in May and got on the ballot, they died. So they were dead the entire campaign, and the Democrats pushed to get that person in so that they could prevent a pastor who was also running for that school board seat from being elected, and the Democrats prevailed in that position. You don't even have to be alive to be hold office in, and that is a conservative part of the state. So it's not liberal crazy land like Seattle. We elected a dead House member in Federal Way a number of years ago in the 30th Ledge District. He passed, but at least he passed away at the very end of the campaign. So this has happened before. That doesn't mean anybody else can get in there. You still have to have all the other elements to it. And so the one thing to remember is that it's a lot more than just who you are or your resume or whether you can take photos or whether you can put together a 350 policy point platform. In fact, those things probably won't help you as much as you think it does. It is about the ability to run for office. That's the second part of this. So it's not just about who the candidate is, it's about the ability to run for office. And just because there are idiots and clowns in there right now doesn't mean that you're going to always be able to boot them out with somebody who's a lot more intelligent or capable. It should be, I mean, in a perfect world, maybe that's how people would think, but we don't have a meritocracy in the political process. It's a campaign and a political process. Meritocracy has nothing to do with it. But it does help if the more you bring to the table, the more likely you are to prevail. Jason, how was the elections in Seattle Council and other local offices? There were a lot of really good elections. I'll have to do something special, but I know like Pasco, even though the Democrats tried to do that fake racist hate letter down there and pretend like it was real, they did not do well in those races. So Pasco City Council was turned over. Yakima did well. I think good people got into office there. The mayor, remember, that was the one that I did the video on where the mayor was trying to call the police on signature gatherers, of course. And in fact, I'll probably be doing something more on that because I got a bunch of records requests back on that one. And there were people who were contacting her who were saying about how hated I was. Glen Morgan was hated by all these attorneys and stuff, and they want to come after me. And so she was getting these messages on her phone from them. Yes, actually, TT, you're asking a question about Tacoma passing Measure 1. I don't know if they passed that. I should go back and look. That one I haven't looked at. I was aware of it, but I didn't pay attention to that post-election. Bryce, you got a question here about can I gather initiative papers from a local place here in Yakima and gather signatures for Let's Go Washington initiatives? Yes, you can. And there's a number of places you can do that. And I would encourage you to do that, actually. And if you don't know where to go to Let's Go Washington page and, contact them. TZ, yeah, good point. We elected close to a dead guy for president. Probably true. Jason, what are your thoughts on the DeSantis and Newsom upcoming debate? DeSantis is not a good debater. I wish he would stop making a fool out of himself. Well, you have no control, none of us do, over generally what politicians or people want to go out there and do. And DeSantis is running for president. Newsom is pretending to not run for president, but he's probably running for president with the gamble that Biden may not last too long, and at some point in time they're going to pull him off the stage. And so that's Newsom's plan, is to be the replacement to Biden. And so obviously Newsom has a reason to do this. The one good thing I think about the two of them getting together is that in comparison to California and Florida, arguing over which state is in better shape is not much of an argument. And so I'm going to be fascinated to see how Newsom tries to present himself as anything but a miserable failure, or at least come across as a miserable failure. So I think featuring him in those kind of environments is great, because I do think that DeSantis will probably be able to demonstrate a pretty big difference between the two of them. I don't care if you like DeSantis or not running for office as president. There's no doubt as governor, I think he's been a good governor in Florida, and I think a lot of things point in that direction when you look at the what's happened in Florida. And it makes sense that he'd want to debate Newsom because he gets a little bit more attention, but we'll see what happens. Let's see. What's the future looking in Vancouver, Washington? Will we see problems of Portland spread to Vancouver? Is a question of Jason. Well, it's likely that they'll spread across the river. There already are here in a lot of ways, but it doesn't have to continue that way. Greg got a question here about how should a Freedom and Liberty city or county council person communicate effectively as a newly elected person with their voters to bring light to the back office issues? That is a great question. Here's what I would recommend. If you're newly elected, if you're one of the city council members that I'm aware of who are actually freedom-oriented in SeaTac or Berrien or Pasco or Kennewick or Prosser. I know we had one bad election in Prosser, but there's some other good people there. And a number of other places, Kelso and Longview and other places around the state where there were some good Ocean Shores. Then I would recommend that one thing you really do is you really focus on transparency and openness, because you're usually stepping into a situation where a lot of dishonest and bad things have been done over the past. And even if they technically have been open to the public, probably the elected officials there or the bureaucrats for sure have tried to conceal it. So I think exposing the truth as fast as you can is very important, because then you're a truth teller and you're exposing what's happening. Because the first thing they're going to try to do is they're going to get you hooked into the dumb and bad decisions that are already made and get you to buy into them so that you can keep going with it. So I think that that's important. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, TZ, you're mentioning that DeSantis had a great House and Senate in Florida, and that's true. And in fact, it became better that way, and that did make his job easy. And I think that's something to look at when you have an elected official that has an easier path than others, and they're able to navigate it. I think that's important. You had the Wisconsin governor now, whose name I'm blanking on, who actually made some really tough decisions in Wisconsin and helped a lot there, and that's a much harder environment than Florida probably. But California is such a nightmare, it's totally worth comparing it. Let's see. Technical difficulties. If you had your dream BMX bike as a kid, what would it be? When I was a kid, there's no way I could get a fancy BMX bike. My bike was whatever the cheapest free bike that I could probably pick up from a thrift store was, and if I could keep it running, I was pretty happy about it. I went through a lot of junky bikes when I was younger, and somehow still am here. So that worked out pretty well. Let's see. Jason Fisher, not a political question. Have you been to the New Seasons store in downtown Vancouver? I have not. You have to tell me more about it. TZ, can we get every state congressman a copy of the Constitution? I'm sure it will be the first time. Most of them have read it. Listen, they all have copies of it. They just don't read it. So I've done this before, even the state legislature, and given them copies of the state Constitution, but they don't necessarily read it, or they want to pretend like they did. Let's see. Alex Brown, more of a fantasy thought, but is it possible for Inslee to be sued once he's out of office for various corruptions throughout his 11-year tenure? It's possible. It's unlikely. And remember, there's a lot of things that are unethical and dishonest that you can do that don't necessarily create grounds for litigation. So I think that's kind of important. Gregorius, yes, what's the best way to communicate? It seems people return to day-to-day life and don't pay attention. Oh, good point. I didn't really deal with methods. One method, obviously, bully pulpit if you're an elected official. But the second one is, and I actually think Jim Walsh does this really well as the state chair, pick a platform that you regularly put your content out on. I don't recommend one that it's easy for them to shadow ban you on, like YouTube or like Facebook. I would definitely encourage you to do it somewhere else where you're going to be more likely to get a little bit less shadow banning or throttling effort, and just start doing it regularly so people know where to go. And then I would, if I was in office, I would actually do newsletters that I would just go lit drop in the community, especially if it's a small community. I think you could do that. Do it on your own. Don't pay for it with taxpayer dollars. Just do it on your own for the heck of it. And so I think that that's important. So I think with that, I'm getting pretty close to closing up this let's Ask Me Anything live stream. I have to run to the grocery store, like probably many people watching this video right now do, and I need to get some stuff for Thanksgiving tomorrow. So I really appreciate the fact that so many people came on tonight. I'm a little surprised how many did, and it was good to have a live stream up after a couple week hiatus where I wasn't here. But so I really appreciate you being here. Really appreciate you watching this channel. If you see people at Thanksgiving and they haven't heard of my channel, please feel free to share it with others. I am shadow banned pretty heavily and throttled all the time, so it's very helpful if we get the word out. It's not a path to power and riches for me, but it is a path towards communicating the truth and hopefully educating more people to be involved. I really strongly believe in the ability of the average citizens, when they get together with other people, to be able to make a big difference where they live. I'm trying to do that in Washington State. I hope you're trying to do that where you live as well. And but it does help if we get the word out to more people. So with that, I look forward to seeing you next time. And I look forward to we'll probably do another live stream, I'm assuming next week, roughly around the same schedule. Again, I do have a couple more videos launching, one tomorrow, one Saturday morning. Please watch them, share them with your friends, show it to your friends if you like them. And Thanksgiving, if you haven't signed those initiatives, bring that packet around at Thanksgiving. It's a great time. If you have one that needs to just be filled out, you always have relatives that probably didn't sign them, and they would if they knew about them. So get them signed. Let's get them all turned in. I love how much the left is melting down about these initiatives right now. It's a wonderful thing to witness and see, and I think we can make an impact just getting out there and being involved. But the future does belong to those who show up. Guys, thank you for showing up tonight, and hopefully I answered some of your questions, if not all of them, and I'll try to do a better job next week. Thank you, and again,